Welcome back to Narrations. Tonight's story is sharp, snowy, funny, and quietly sincere beneath all the chaos. The proposal looks like a loud enemies to lovers rom-com on the surface, but underneath, it's about fear of vulnerability, chosen family, and learning that control can't replace connection. This is the story of Margaret Tate and Andrew Paxton. Margaret Tate does not believe in softness. She believes in efficiency, precision, authority, control. Every morning in New York begins the same way: purposeful steps, sharp heels, clipped instructions. Margaret moves through her publishing office like a force of nature. Assistants scatter. Editors tense. Meetings bend around her schedule. She is respected. She is feared. And she is alone. Margaret is the editor-in-chief of a major publishing house, powerful, decisive, relentless. She built her career by being better, faster, tougher than everyone else. She learned early that hesitation invites replacement, and kindness is often mistaken for weakness. Her accent gives her away sometimes, a reminder that she didn't grow up here. She came from Canada, worked her way up, and never stopped pushing. Success, to Margaret, isn't just achievement. It's survival. Andrew Paxton works for her. Technically. Officially, he's her assistant. Unofficially, he's everything that keeps her life running: schedules, reminders, coffee, damage control. Andrew knows her moods better than anyone. He anticipates her needs before she voices them. He absorbs her criticism without protest. But Andrew isn't weak. He's patient. Andrew grew up in Alaska, surrounded by warmth, family, and a kind of grounded kindness Margaret has never had room for. He came to New York with dreams of being an editor, maybe a writer, something creative. Working for Margaret was supposed to be a step forward. Instead, it became a holding pattern. Andrew tells himself it's temporary. That learning from Margaret is worth the cost. That enduring her sharpness will eventually pay off. But something in him is tired. Everything changes in one moment. Margaret learns that her visa has expired. She is being deported. The career she built, the life she controls so carefully, is suddenly at risk, not because she failed, but because she missed a deadline. Panic rises quickly, disguised as irritation. Margaret doesn't plead. She improvises. In a split second, she announces that she and Andrew are engaged. The room freezes. Andrew is blindsided. Margaret doesn't ask. She tells. This isn't romance, it's desperation. She lays out the plan calmly, ruthlessly. A fake engagement. A quick wedding. A solution that keeps her in the country and her career intact. Andrew is furious. But he's also trapped. Margaret holds power over his future. His recommendation. His career. She promises him promotion, advancement, opportunity, everything he's been waiting for. Andrew agrees. Not because he wants to. Because he feels he has no choice. They enter a strange performance: public affection, staged smiles, rehearsed answers. Margaret remains in control, directing every detail, correcting Andrew constantly. Andrew follows along, biting back resentment, trying not to disappear entirely inside the charade. To make the engagement believable, they travel to Alaska. Andrew's home. Margaret hates it immediately. The cold. The quiet. The lack of control. Andrew's family welcomes her warmly, too warmly. His parents, his grandmother, his entire town embrace Margaret without suspicion. They celebrate the engagement with joy that feels overwhelming and intrusive to someone who has built her life on distance. Andrew watches Margaret struggle. For the first time, she isn't powerful. She's out of place. She doesn't know the rules here. She doesn't know how to behave when people are kind without wanting something in return. The warmth makes her uncomfortable, defensive. And yet, something begins to shift. Margaret sees Andrew differently. Not as an assistant. As a person. She watches him with his family, relaxed, affectionate, rooted. She sees the version of Andrew that New York never allowed her to notice. And for the first time, she wonders who she became in order to survive. Andrew, meanwhile, starts reclaiming parts of himself he forgot he'd lost. Surrounded by people who know him deeply, he begins to feel the imbalance in his life more clearly. How much he's given, how little he's demanded. The fake engagement begins to blur. Not because of romance yet, but because of truth. Margaret is forced to confront something she's avoided for years. That success achieved without connection can still feel empty. And Andrew begins to question whether patience without boundaries is just another form of self-erasure. The lie holds. For now. But the cost of pretending is about to become unavoidable. Alaska changes the air around people. It slows conversations, softens voices, makes silences feel fuller instead of awkward. And for Margaret Tate, who has built her entire life on momentum, that stillness feels like standing on unfamiliar ground without armor. At first, she treats the Paxton home like hostile territory. She keeps her posture rigid, her answers clipped. She watches conversations instead of joining them, scanning for expectations she might miss. Margaret is used to being prepared. Meetings, negotiations, outcomes. Here, there is nothing to prepare for. Andrew's family simply is. His mother fusses gently, offering food and stories without demanding attention. His father observes quietly, welcoming without interrogation. His grandmother, sharp, perceptive, amused, watches Margaret the way one watches someone who has forgotten how to rest. No one challenges Margaret. And that unsettles her more than resistance ever could. Margaret doesn't know how to respond to kindness that isn't transactional. In her world, everything has a price. Respect is earned through authority, loyalty through leverage, affection through usefulness. Here, she is offered warmth without proof of value. She braces for rejection that never comes. Andrew notices her discomfort immediately. He sees the way she flinches when people touch her arm casually. The way she corrects herself mid-sentence, as if afraid of saying something wrong. The way she retreats into sarcasm when emotion threatens to surface. For years, Andrew has seen Margaret as powerful and immovable. Here, he sees her as human. And something shifts inside him. Being home reminds Andrew of the person he used to be, the boy who spoke freely, laughed easily, and believed his dreams mattered. The man who wanted more than proximity to power. Who didn't measure his worth by how well he endured being diminished. He realizes how much of himself he's been postponing. The fake engagement begins to blur, not because of romance, but because of exposure. Margaret is no longer directing the narrative. Andrew is no longer reacting to it. They start talking, really talking. Not about work. Not about logistics. About choices. Margaret admits pieces of her past in fragments. How she learned to be relentless because softness cost her opportunities. How fear sharpened her instincts. How survival became habit, then identity. Andrew listens without interruption. And for the first time, Margaret doesn't feel judged. Andrew shares his truth too, how patience slowly turned into self-erasure. How loyalty became an excuse to stay small. How loving his work never meant sacrificing his voice. These conversations don't resolve neatly. They linger. The town's celebration forces them closer, dancing, ceremonies, rituals rooted in belonging rather than achievement. Margaret is pulled into moments she would normally avoid. She dances badly. Laughs unexpectedly. Loses control publicly. And nothing breaks. Instead, she feels something unfamiliar. Relief. Andrew watches her loosen, and something in him hardens, not against her, but against the version of himself that allowed imbalance to persist for so long. When he finally confronts her, it isn't explosive. It's precise. He tells her that fear doesn't excuse cruelty. That leadership doesn't require humiliation. That he agreed to the lie because he didn't believe his needs mattered, and that realization scares him more than anger ever could. Margaret doesn't deflect. She doesn't counter. She absorbs it. Because this time, she knows he's right. The truth surfaces publicly soon after. The engagement is exposed, the lie laid bare. The moment Margaret once would have manipulated, she now faces openly. She could fight. She could argue. She could dominate. Instead, she does something radical. She tells the truth. Not the strategic truth. The whole one. She admits her fear. Her selfishness. Her mistake. She releases Andrew from obligation without bargaining. She accepts the consequences without resistance. And in that surrender, something extraordinary happens. Andrew sees her strength, not as dominance, but as integrity. Margaret chooses to leave. Not because she's forced to. Because she understands that staying under false pretenses would destroy the very thing she's only just learned to value. Back in New York, the consequences land fully. Margaret faces loss, status, certainty, control. But she stands differently now. She speaks differently. She no longer leads with intimidation. She leads with clarity. Andrew steps forward too. He reclaims his ambition. Sets boundaries. Redefines his worth. He no longer waits for permission to be more than useful. When they reunite, it isn't dramatic. There are no tricks left. No leverage. No lies. Just two people meeting honestly for the first time. Love doesn't arrive as a whirlwind. It arrives as recognition. The proposal isn't about a fake relationship becoming real. It's about two people shedding the roles they hid behind, and choosing each other without fear or control. Sometimes love doesn't change who you are. It reminds you of who you don't have to be anymore. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this narration, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next story.